Hey everyone, welcome back to part 2 with John Cardamone. This is Handing the Shame Back. I'm Gloria Masters. I'm your host. He's with us all the way from Melbourne and Victoria, Australia. He's a survivor, he's an educator, he's a speaker, and he's already given us a lot to think about. So part 2, just to recap, between about 6 and 8 years of age, he was abused by an extended family member. Luckily, when he disclosed this to his mother, steps were immediately taken, and we're so grateful for that. He was then kept safe, never had to be in that company again, and this person was charged and convicted. So we're thrilled for John. John, welcome back.
Welcome. It's amazing to be back in our first discussion. Hopefully, your audience was able to engage and hopefully help them in some small way.
I would say so. I'd say there'll be many, many takeaways. So, incredible to me that we can have you with us. And John, just as we're looking in part 1, you had mentioned the teaching, the fact that you were able to do some really good, have some good interventions, do some therapy, and had mum and family standing beside you, which all helps, of course. It helps the overcoming and being able to um, kind of move on with life. What happened for you in terms of you? I heard you mention you were teaching. So can you tell us a little bit
Hmm.
about what drew you into that?
Yeah, I kind of fell into it. I started off my my career, if you like, in the workforce as a concreter. So I'm not sure if that's a different word in New Zealand, but laying footpaths and factory floors, and I don't know what I was doing, but it was a job, and it
Yeah.
was paying the bills, even though I was still at home at the time. Um, but I always had this natural my natural characteristics of my personalities always been very protective. So I'm very protective of my wife and my children, probably overprotective, and it's something that I need to work on because I've already said to my wife, my son will be the best priest and my daughter will be the best nun. But I'm not sure how that will go down too well. So bit too overprotective there. But yeah, I just wanted to always help, and I think that might be a natural characteristic of adult survivors. You just want to help. We have a lot of empathy, and we have a really good understanding of, I feel, what people need at a particular time. So I fell into I went to TAFE, and I did sales and marketing as you do when you don't know what you want to do, which was a waste of time at the time, but it got me into uni to do a Bachelor of Commerce that I have no idea about economics or anything like that. So that was a bit of a waste of time. But that now that I look back, it was good that I did that because I was able to get into a diploma of education. So access to that, which means my course was a little bit shorter. Um, and I just really wanted to help children because I feel I have my spidey senses, as we call it over here, a good gut feel of when things aren't right for families and children. And I just have this big feeling of wanting to help and support. So got into teaching, and I really had in teaching, you have different strengths. People might be have more strength in maths or English or writing, but I feel my strength was, the welfare and the well-being of children and families. So after teaching for a little bit, yeah, moved into to leadership and eventually now being a deputy principal. And my portfolio of work is around well-being. So it's a big portfolio, but that's, essentially supporting our families and our children, so, yeah.
Oh, and look, how beautiful. And now that you're looking at that and I'm asking you about it, can you see how, of course, that would be where you would end up, of course.
Well, I'm just so thankful because I know, unfortunately, for a lot of adult survivors, we all take different pathways given the nature of what we've been through. And,
Mm.
there's no right or wrong. There's certainly better pathways, in terms of health wise, but whatever that looks like is as long as we're trying to help ourselves. But for me, I'm really grateful that my pathway was relatively okay, and that I was able to get to where I am. So, not loving my role, loving my job, and loving my new lease of. You go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off,
No,
or do I? So what age child did you start teaching?
I was a mature age,
No,
if that
no, what
makes any
age
sense. Oh,
children did you start to what were your first
ah,
how old
yes.
kids?
They were year four, so around 8 or 9.
Ah, shock horror. I got you. Do you see what I
Yeah,
just did there? Now tell me what that means.
yeah. How I was feeling at that time. There
No,
were a
meaning
few. Oh,
meaning the link between you at 8 emerging
yes.
out of this and feeling you could tell mum, you were believed, blah, 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 and then you as the adult being able to work with those children. Isn't that amazing, that age?
Yes, yes, I think it was by accident, but who knows? I think everything happens for a reason. So yes, that's where it certainly all started.
Wow. So you're still obviously in the teaching profession. What are you noticing? What's the biggest gift for you in that space?
The biggest gift for me is, as funny as it might sound, is my lived experience. So I'm in a place where I can say that my past is my greatest strength. And what I mean by that is that I can use it to the advantage of helping and supporting others. So obviously, it's really unfortunate what happened. I wish it never happened, but I'm in a mindset in a space where it's happened. Okay, I've dealt with it. I'm still dealing with it. Deal with it forever, no matter what job that I do.
Yes.
So why not use it as a strength to help children? Like I said, I feel like I have a gut feel when something's wrong. Um, so I can use that to my advantage to help children and families.
So tell me this. I totally understand what you're saying. You've been able to turn something horrendous and unpalatable actually into a really good advocacy and almost insight into what children may display. So how powerful is that, John? That's amazing. Are you able to tell us, when I say answer this, are you able to tell us if you've been able to spot any kind of abuse or that type of activity being present in a child or children at your school? Has that been something you've been able to uncover?
Yeah, ab- absolutely. Especially understanding how groomers and perpetrators work to groom. And, I speak to lots of children, whether it's at my place of work or whether it's in the community, and you can really understand if someone is trying to take advantage of someone, and understanding what those activities look like. And unfortunately, that can look like a lot of things, but I'm very hyper vigilant. Maybe that's from my experience on,
Yeah.
my spidey senses, they start tingling when, things are being shared. So, um, yeah, absolutely. It's whether it's an advantage or whether I would know some of the things that are disclosed if something happened to me or not. But I'm in a place where I feel confident that, I can support children and families going through difficult times.
Well, it's interesting because, the fact that you have an experience of that and you talk about hypervigilance and hypervigilance is one of the hallmarks actually that survivors like us experience and then carry on into our adult lives. Now, we don't always want to, but we do. We become aware of sounds, of sights, of smells, of proximity of people, who's behind, who's in front, how close, all of that. And it's part of our complex post trauma, response. But it's good to understand it and recognize that, for survivors watching, hello. Um, we can sometimes experience that, and it's simply a hangover from those days. Yeah, what do you think of that?
Uh, Absolutely. And I, my poor wife, every time we go out, straight away, okay, they look dangerous. There's a step there. I don't want my kids to fall over. It's going to rain soon. Like, so I'm always thinking of the worst case scenario, which sometimes it's not a bad thing, but uh, a lot of the time it can be because it can take away the joy of being in the moment. So that's something that I'm working on. And I think I'm working on that relatively well, being in the moment with my children. But that hypervigilance is always happening. So, for example, if I'm on a plane, that really makes me anxious, like to the point of I do. That's one thing I'm trying to cope with because I am doing some flying. My poor wife, every time we fly, she's got marks on her arms because I'm pinching and grabbing her arm as the plane's going up. But
Yeah.
I'm, like, at the back of the plane rocking with eyes, crying because I'm just feeling like every bump that the plane's going down. Like, when you're hypervigilant, you really you s you're a lo you're thinking logically, but you're just thinking of everything that can go wrong.
Well, and it can lead into that catastrophizing, but equally, just to discern, is the flying because it's a confined space, or do you think some people do actually have a fear of flying? What do
I
you
think it's a few Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think there's a sense of not being in control, and that might be related to me as a child being sexually abused, not feeling in control. So when things that might be out of my control, that I can get anxious. So, for example, if my kids are getting really sick, that can make me anxious because you can't, apart from giving medication for a fever, but a lot of it's out of your control. So me recognizing what my triggers are, I try and work with that. But I think for me, and it might be a common thing, you would know a little bit better, Gloria, but having a sense of being out of control can sometimes trigger me. But for example, we went on a cruise on a big ship, and I wasn't anxious at all. And my
Oh.
wife goes, "Why?" And she was pretty anxious. But I said, in my head, if the ship goes down, I feel like I'm in control, that I can grab you and I can swim, even though it's highly unlikely. But
Yeah.
I, yeah, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah. No, I understand. And look, I think if people, if there were ever specialists who got inside a survivor's brain and looked, I think, man, how have they coped for as long
Yeah,
for as long as they
yeah.
have. No, look, I really appreciate that, and I think what you're doing is giving permission actually for our amazing survivors to feel phew, it's not just me. Yes, I experience a hypervigilance, or yes, I don't cope if I can't control aspects of that. So thank you, John, because those are the gold nuggets for our survivor family. And we just want people to feel as comfortable and as validated as they can be. Because one thing we must always remember is child sexual abuse was not a choice, and I
Mm.
think when we can give credence to that and validation to that, hopefully there's a little bit of peace or ease in there. So John, what would you like us to know? You as the adult Now you know you're a dad, you're an amazing teacher, incredible survivor. Um, what else would you like us to know about you leading into perhaps any tips or techniques you might like to offer our audience?
Yeah. And everyone's at a different point, and everyone can get triggered at different points.
Yeah.
And speaking to your audience directly, if that does happen, it's okay and it's quite normal. Um, it's trauma 101 that trauma doesn't have a timeline and it can come. I've heard people that are 70 years old, 75 years old, and they've never really had a trigger up until their abuser has passed away, and then they're flooded with memories. I'm sure you've heard that a lot, Gloria. So
Yeah.
um, it's quite normal. And the best piece of advice I can give people listening is find connection, find your sense of belonging, and through those two things, there's a lot of hope to come out of that. Now, I'm not saying that you have to talk because not everyone likes to talk, but finding avenues that help you. So whether that's being part of community groups, whether that's sports, playing an instrument, going to church, or uh, playing a bingo club or whatever that might be, that can be part of your therapy. But I think as survivors, sometimes, and I really say this lightly, we don't like for me anyway. What's helped me is not to be in this victim mentality that this has happened to me, so I'm going to stay in bed. If we're able, if we're able to communicate, move, and do lots of daily things, I think there's part of us have a responsibility, not for anyone else, but for ourselves, because we deserve, absolute deserve, to have a good, what's normal these days, but adequate life. And sometimes the only person that can start that is ourselves. And absolutely seek help if you need it because we've never been in a time, especially in New Zealand. I think we're very similar with our mental health care system. There's a lot of work to do in that area, but anyone can pick up the phone and speak to Kids Helpline. And forgive me if they're not in New Zealand, but I'm sure it's kind of the same. Anyone can pick up the phone and talk to someone 24 hours, 7 days a week. Um, and that's connection. And sometimes the best connection is talking to a total stranger who's experienced it in these areas, and there's lots of services. So my final piece of advice is small, safe steps.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. Yeah. You know,
Hopefully that's not too overwhelming, but
I know, no,
it's a lot, and I
yeah.
yeah,
I think, you talk about we deserve to have an adequate life. I almost want to overcompensate and to say we deserve to have a phenomenal life.
yeah,
If you
yeah,
think about I don't know if you ever saw this on Facebook, it was a few years ago now, rugby pitch, and they had like 20 teenagers, 15 to 18, and the coach calls out, right, if they're all standing on the same line.
I've seen this.
Yeah. If you had trauma in your childhood, take a step back. If you were brought up in a one-parent family, take a step back. If you had abuse, take it. And so the field was laid out, John. Now, what he then did was turn to the people at the front and say, "Those ones at the back, they're going to overtake you. They're the winners."
Mm, yeah,
And it's that type of thing, isn't it? Because in us, as you mentioned earlier in the show, in us is this wanting to help and wanting to make things better for the next generation and wanting to give to others. So, yeah, what do you think of that?
I think I'm learning that it's a natural response that we've just got a heart that's so big that we just want to help others. We're really good at being empathic and not sympathizing because I think they're two big different things or two different meanings.
Yeah.
And I think as adult survivors, we have so much good to be able to support and help others, whether that's through volunteering, whether that's coming onto Gloria's podcast and sharing your story, or and you know what, not everyone's like that, or whether it's you helping others in the community in your own way. But I think small, safe steps forward, no matter how slow or big they are, as long as we're moving forward and trying to help ourselves, because if we do that, we can help others.
Yeah. And I think that's right, and we do know that acts of service actually help lift us out of ourselves, and that can be that final bastion that you and I talked about earlier called hope. So I love that.
Yeah.
John, just as we're closing up, is there anything else you would like to share with us today?
Yes, I do. I think we, as adults, we all have a responsibility for child prevention of child sexual abuse or any kind of trauma.
Yeah.
And I think we do that through role modeling,
Yes.
the behaviors that we expect. We need to teach and educate our children, nephews, nieces, that it's okay to share their concerns. And the only way we do that is building a foundation of connection and a sense of belonging. And
Mm.
what I needed at that time was a language, a way that I could articulate my worst fears. And the only way we can do that is no different how we teach maths and science in schools, is that it needs to be repetitive and
Yeah.
it needs to be role modeled.
Yeah, and it needs to become a priority in our education system. So, John,
Yeah.
stay right there. Thank you so, so much. Please don't go anywhere. Survivors, wow, lots of food for thought today, and John shared many nuggets, but there's a couple I want to remind you of. So one was trauma doesn't have a timeline, and I love that. You may be 20 years old, you may be 50, you might be in your 80s. When it's your time, it will appear. And when you are meant to deal with it, you will be ready to. How do I know this? Because it will be in your mind. So I love that. I love that he talked about trauma doesn't have a timeline. As many of you will reach out and say, I can't quite remember and I really want to. No, you're not ready to. That's why it's not there. He also talked about small safe steps, and I love that too. Look, you don't have to do huge, big, dramatic changes in your life. Just you do you. You do what sits with you, the small, safe steps. John talks about it might be that maybe you pick up a journal and start journaling. But very grateful to John. And I think, as always, lovely people, you're never alone. I see you. I stand beside you and I believe you.